This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, and good morning. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me, Kirsty. I'm so excited to be chatting with you about the upcoming release of the book. And I wanted to take a couple minutes to learn a lot more about you and to essentially learn about your history and your past. So I was hoping that you could kind of tell me a little bit about yourself and then also kind of tell me about growing up. And let's start there.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks so much for having me and helping me with all my technical difficulties. It's definitely one thing people will know about me is that I'm a scrambler. Just don't let me near anything that's new or expensive if it's tech. Um, I grew up in Scotland. I'm 38. I'm married with two kids, Victor and Gabriel. My little ones, 2 years and 1 year. I have two cats, two pythons, and we recently acquired a tarantula. That's kind of sums up the oddball nature of our household.
Yeah, that's
I-
quite a
yeah.
menagerie.
Well, yeah, I'm an animal lover, and I always like the ones where there's a bit of interesting social history behind them, especially where they can be sources of anxiety, funnily enough. For me, cats are like the complete antithesis to anxious creatures. You know, they tend to just spend all day sleeping, and I have a cat called Maud who just wants me to go to bed all the time so that she can sleep on my head like a pillow, and that's how she would like to live out her life. I let her. The snakes are great. I love them. I use them a lot actually as a teaching tool. And the spider, well, that's my husband's, office buddy.
Nice. That could be quite an experience, I'm sure, while he's working to have the spider hanging out with him. Does the spider hang out in a cage, or does it just kind of crawl around, or how does that work?
They're all free range. They all get on fine. No, it's in a little terrarium. And it's recently spun a little web where it's molted, so they're really fascinating. You sort of kind of do like this, and then they
Ooh,
sideways shuffle out of their skins. A bit like
nice.
those snakes turn themselves sort of inside out, kind of. I find this really fascinating because I think it's a great metaphor for moving forward from anxiety because it's about the shedding of skins and being free, releasing yourself from enclosure, which is actually self-made.
That's pretty fantastic. And I think that, one thing that we're really learning more these days than ever is that everyone has some form of anxiety, whether they realize it or not. So I was
Absolutely.
hoping that we could talk really quickly, first of all, about if you've experienced anxiety in the past,
Oh, yeah.
and also, kind of what got you interested in this entire journey. Was it your own anxiety and your own experiences? Also, what are some of the subtle signs, if that makes any sense, that people who have anxiety might not even be aware that they have anxiety?
Sure. Okay. Yes, I have experienced anxiety in its normal, healthy sense, but also in a disordered sense. And it's quite important that people realize there is a difference. Anxiety is normal. It's perfectly healthy to experience anxiety. It's part of our self-preservation system. When it becomes a disorder, it's because it's preventing you from doing things that you would normally do. And yes, I have experienced quite disabling anxiety, including obsessive compulsive disorder. Some of the signs of anxiety, in particular, like OCD, can be really, really subtle. And yes, people won't be aware that they have them. Um, for example, this morning, feeling a little anxious about, being interviewed live, I had this tightness in my chest, but actually it's located between my shoulder blades. Now, not many people would realize that that's actually a sign of anxiety. It feels far more like backache, like you've, done an injury of some kind, or it might feel like asthmatic symptoms because there's a tightness there, but actually it's anxiety that's causing that. And just realizing actually can really be a huge boon because it really helps to relieve the symptoms right away by just acknowledging them, which is one of the reasons that we said about writing this book. Anxiety has always been very meaningful to me because of my personal experience with it throughout my life, right since childhood. I was a very anxious child, became, increasingly so over the years. However, I always challenged it and did unusual things anyway, such as burlesque, modeling, snake keeping, ghost hunting, anything a little unusual that might provoke anxiety in most people. I made a point of kind of mastering. Psychology became my real focus, and after having some CBT myself when I was about 30, I then had the opportunity to train in that same material. And so I did that and was able to start immediately helping other people with low intensity CBT techniques and guided self-help. While I was doing that, I had so many insights as to other ways to look at the problem and other ways to address it, because the sort of one size fits all script that you get with most treatments just doesn't fit everybody, one of the many ironies of life. And so instead, rather than continuing to orient around having anxiety, rather than managing anxiety every day, it's about how can we actually work with it and actually transcend it, make it meaningful, purposeful, and useful. And that's really where the concept of ironic fundamentalism came about.
Yeah, and I love the concept because it's really empowering. And, as I mentioned earlier, I really feel like it's something more or less that the world really needs right now, because there is so much anxiety out there. What
Yes.
if you could give one piece of advice to people who are dealing with uncertainty? And it really seems, at least in the US, there's a huge lack of leadership. There's just nowhere to go. There's no comforting words. There's no kind of end in sight, if that makes any sense to our current situation. So if you could give, a piece of advice to people who are suffering from anxiety, what they can do to make their lives easier, as well as, maybe some great reading places to go to educate ourselves, aside from the book, which is getting ready to come out, where would you point them?
Okay. Overall, accepting anxiety is there is so important. If we deny it, if we are wrestling with it, we're actually putting all of our energy into it and we're actually creating it. Yeah. And so if we can accept it and also accept that this too will pass, just as the symptoms pass, the situation in which we find ourselves will pass. Okay, we don't know what it's going to look like in a week's time, a month's time, in a year's time, but that's okay. We don't need to know. It will pass and things will change. And ultimately, you will cope. You just will, because you always have coped. You're here now, so you will cope. That's really where most people's anxiety is quite tricky and quite sneaky, because it always looks like something very particular. But actually, pretty much all anxieties boil down to a fear of not coping. So telling yourself that all the evidence is there, that this will pass, everything will change, and you will cope. Just because you don't know what that looks like, it doesn't matter for now. That would be the baseline of advice there. A great book, it's fabulous, it's a seminal book really, it would be Susan Jeffers on Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. It's
Nice.
just such a great go-to book for anybody. It's very accessible, it's fun to read, it doesn't take you very long. That would probably be my first suggestion. And there's just so many others. I can maybe put, if there's any links anywhere, I can probably put a little book list for readers
Yeah,
as
that would
well.
be great. That would be great. If you could send that over to me, I think that'd be a wonderful resource. And in addition to that, we have some exciting stuff coming up in terms of the fact that we're going to be pre-releasing upcoming appendices to the book, which are going to kind of help guide people during these, challenging times.
Yeah.
So the book is coming out on June 5th, which is super, super exciting. In the meantime, in the meantime, do you want to go ahead and share with everyone just a little bit, about the upcoming appendices we have coming out? In fact, the first one I believe is going to come out today. So if you want to go ahead and share, about the first one we've worked on and then the upcoming two, that would be fantastic.
Okay, yeah, just another great book that popped into my head there was Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. Just really worth reading or listening to. The concept of being present is so key to working with anxiety. Okay, so the section that's going to be posted today, that was what you asked for, wasn't it? It's
Yes.
really looking at the anxiety that surrounds how we think other people see us. Okay, and the deep fundamental irony here, bearing in mind the concept of if really is that the universe and everything is paradoxical, so you might as well embrace it. Okay. The big irony is that what other people think of you is actually really none of your business. And it can be quite hard for people to hear that, because they really feel, well, no, but it's me. Actually, it's not me, it's the other person. And everyone's entitled to the privacy of their own thoughts, the privacy of their own minds. And trying to establish what other people may or may not think about you is actually a form of judgment, and you're really just projecting fears and anxieties, or the other way around, desires, onto that person. And actually, ironically, you're kind of you're judging them by suspecting that they might be judging you. There was a Scottish poet known as the Bard, Robert Burns, so, spoke of this really beautifully. And to quote him is, "What's empower the gifted gears to see yourselves as others see us?" Which roughly translates in regular English as, wouldn't it be a wonderful power to be able to see yourselves as others do? But of course, the irony is that no, it would not be, because it would never be what we expect. And also, where's the fun in that?
Absolutely. That's a really good point. And, I think that the real challenge is that, particularly today, everyone has a very, very carefully crafted image, if that makes any sense. I mean, when it comes to marketing and things like that, people spend a lot of time and a lot of money trying to ensure that they are able to be that. And so, I think that we spend so much time trying to show our clout and our influence and things like that. At the end of the day, people become much more focused on being an image rather than being a real person. And I think that can be really challenging. And so I know part of what, you do is you help people find their authenticity. And that's something that, your coaching has been really empowering for us. I've been reading your reviews on your website. I've been absolutely amazed, with some of the quotes and some of the results that I've seen. So truly transformative stuff. So that speaks about, our first release. Why don't you talk about the second and the third?
Okay, the second, I think, was going to be why science and spirituality are actually seen from the same hymn sheet, albeit it may all be in Latin, but actually that's one of the reasons why they're not as different as they might appear.
Well, everything is Latin at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, everything goes back to everything. All roads lead to Rome, but then again,
Yes.
we're all road to nowhere at the same time. Yeah, it's just again, it's one of those sort of fundamental ironies, is that we tend to think that we have to choose between modalities of thinking, that it's this or that, but actually we don't have to choose between them. They're trying to address the same big questions, but by coming at it through different lenses. Science in particular has this real passion for just measuring the crap out of everything, whereas spiritual aspects, or modality, doesn't tend to measure things. It tends to operate more on felt experience. And that's actually the area where science and religion are really starting to meet now in the real, inquiry world, because this idea of consciousness as an explanatory gap is bringing both science and spiritual viewpoints together. This is where you start to get into the realms of things like quantum physics, and then talking about qualia, which is really felt experience through conscious awareness. So how does, for example, the physical atoms that make us up, and the electricity in the brain, how does that give rise to conscious experience? That's really the big question that philosophers of old have always been trying to answer, and it's really one of those fundamental questions that science is trying to answer. So the fields of cosmology, neuroscience, and physics are really starting to dovetail now, and what they're coming up with is like a measured but reworded version of what all of the ancient mystics would have said. So one of the many reasons why science and religion or spirituality are actually not the opposites, or not the opposing forces that they actually seem. They're just looking at the same problems through different lenses. And you can take the best from both, because everyone's on their own journey.
Absolutely. And what do you find about that journey that is so the same, if that makes any sense, from both the religious perspective and the science perspective?
The journey really, I mean, it comes back to the sort of discussion that Joseph Campbell might have had about the hero's journey, and where people are called, they're called to action. So whether that's they're called to science to uncover the great mysteries of the universe, or whether they're called in a more spiritual, religious sense, then they're called to inquire upon these same questions too. But both become leaders, and they become leaders in the true sense because they're called to it, they're tasked, they're burdened with it, rather than, you know, setting themselves out to be a leader by identity. You know, so it's often like those who would really just want leadership in order to lead others maybe aren't the best people to lead, you know. And it's because of our self-doubts that we can be assured that we are the natural leaders, because if we're not doubting, if we're not considering everything around us, then we're not treading a new path. You know, the true heart-centered leader is always willing to step out in the dark, or step out onto unfamiliar ground ahead of others, in spite of and because of their uncertainties. If they know where they're going,
Yeah,
it's not, or someone else has done the groundwork.
that really brings to mind a fabulous quote that I just thought of when you mentioned that, from Martin Luther King, that says that a true leader, you know, can basically step out into the darkness even if they can't see the first stair on the staircase and take the leap. And, you know, that's always been one of my personal favorite quotes. You know, of course, being from Atlanta, number one, but also number two, just, you know, really being willing to take that jump when it's necessary, and really being able to handle that uncertainty, I think, is the mark of a real leader. So that's fantastic. And do you want to talk about the third one?
Okay, if I've got it right, I think the third one's going to be about the cultural lenses.
Yes.
Is that it? Yeah, you're
So
keeping me right on that
that's
one.
exactly it. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. You're doing a great job. Talk a little bit about the cultural lenses, and just kind of share, you know, how that can be a real challenge, particularly in relationship, and the way that it deals with people's expectations, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think considering cultural lenses really ties the other two topics together, because it's about how you think other people see you, and actually that's not really your concern. Your concern really should be about finding common ground and being aware of the lenses that each person has. And so the same between whether you have a scientific outlook or a spiritual outlook on life, these are lenses. So you would maybe have like person A, for example, here, person B here, and you'd have something in the middle that they're both observing and they're maybe both experiencing. But person A has their series of different cultural lenses on which are biases. So it could be gender, it could be what era they were born in, it could be where they were born, it could be their income status, it could be, you know, any number of different things, including things that are acquired in life. So experiences. So for example, what kind of school did they go to? Was it a nice experience? Were they ever bullied? Did they ever have you know, an allergic reaction to something in their life? Have they ever been disappointed with other people, and so on and so on? These are all lenses that we're either born with or that we acquire. And then person B over here has their set. Okay, so trying to observe the same thing in the middle and expect that you automatically agree and say the same thing is really just ludicrous. So instead, it's really about having this sense of appreciation and acceptance of these lenses. And the more you actually begin to harness the secret powers of your anxiety, you can start to shed them whilst realizing that someone else may still be holding theirs, and that that's okay. You know, it's so important to be self-aware, even in an argument or a conflict where the other person isn't. Because when you stop being self-aware, when you're looking at a situation, a conflict perhaps between two people, a couple, if you don't drop the lenses, if you aren't aware that they're there, then you're magnifying the situation all the time. And that if you drop them, if you learn to let go of them, you're not fighting anymore. You're not coming from a place of having to stand your ground or having to defend your point of view, because you're the one that realizes that point of view is completely subjective, and that you actually create space and you hold space for the other person, you know, their perspectives to perhaps grow. So
Yeah, no,
that would
that
be
totally makes sense. And then
really.
just to wrap, yeah, that's great. To wrap things up, what I wanted to kind of get, at a high level is please tell me and, the audience why this book is going to be so important and why they should check it out right away.
Okay, so it's based on an acceptance that the life, the universe, and everything is one big paradox. It's one big hilarious cosmic joke. Everything that you think, actually, you don't really know, and everything that is kind of really isn't at the same time. So when you're anxious, you tend to be in a place of doubt, and you're doubting something. But the irony there is that when you're doubting, you can only doubt it if you have faith. So in order to notice that you're doubting something like, I won't cope, I won't manage, etc., etc., you must actually hold some faith in yourself that you will. Yeah, so it's about harnessing these ironies and being able to hold quite often two opposing ideas in your head at any one time, and realizing that somewhere in the gap is, the closest you're going to get to any particular truth. And so through this process of identifying the fundamental ironies of everything you're experiencing, anxiety itself stops being this crushing weight that's preventing you from moving forward, and instead you flip it and it becomes an immeasurable force behind you, pushing you forward, so that you can really, really grow. For example, intrusive thoughts are a huge part of anxiety, and they're very, very distressing. When you have these horrible, maybe mental images, you hear these nasty thoughts, whether about yourself, about someone else, about a situation, whatever it is, and people get so upset about it, and they forget to see the hilarious irony is that the fact that they're upset about it, the emotion is telling them that they find these thoughts abhorrent, that we are not our thoughts, we're the person having them. And when we react emotionally to them, it's actually telling us something so powerful and so valuable about our inner beauty, about our values and what really matters to us. And so it's the same with physical symptoms. You learn to interpret these physical symptoms that you're having. Actually, you can flip them around and treat them as though it's excitement, because it is. And so ironic fundamentalism, I feel, is just really important, especially right now, because it's offering an alternative viewpoint. It's also got a sense of humor about it, but it's really the practical application of metaphysics, but in a really accessible way. So that, for example, your heightened senses that you experience in anxiety, you may have never noticed it before, but that's what's going on. That's a gift, as people strive for years and years and years to expand their sensory experience and mental rehearsal. Right now, in a crisis like this, I know so many people who feel this is their time to shine because they've been mentally rehearsing for all sorts of crises all their life. And, there's so many other traits that we have if we're a practiced anxious person. But what we have to learn to do is to flip it, to find the irony, so that we can really grow as individuals and really hold space for others to grow too.
And, growth can be painful, and, kind of what is one suggestion that you would have for people in terms of learning and understanding growth?
Okay, growth, that's a very good question. It's a really big question. Growth is moving towards the source that nourishes you. So if we think of like a flower, it's growing towards the sun. Yeah, we think when we grow as humans, there's so many capacities in which we do grow. So we grow socially, we grow, emotionally, and cognitively, physically we grow, but the only one that we ever really seem to notice or appreciate, but spiritually as well. And that's where I'd say the real source of light is for all of us. And whatever approach that we take, it doesn't really matter whether we go through, traditional science, whether we go through a particular faith, whether we go through a more ambiguous kind of woo-woo sense of spirituality, it really doesn't matter. As long as we are embracing experience in the moment, in a space of non-judgment, it allows us to move forward and to expand our consciousness without bringing in new lenses, without bringing in new biases. So in a way, growth is really about surrendering to what we can't control. The meaning of life really is to live, not to think about living.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all, life in motion, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
So totally makes sense. And I think we would be remiss if we didn't do one last thing, and that is that we need to give a shout out over to our friend Morgana for putting us on the path of being able to, work together. So do you want to just say a little bit about, how you know Morgana and, how long you guys have been working together, just briefly?
Yeah, okay, yeah, briefly, yeah. Morgana and I go back a long time. So we met when we were about 14, and we both turned up at a Baptist church on the same day. I don't think either of us really knew why we were there. We were just kind of curious, and we went along, we turned up, and we instantly became friends. We were then summarily kicked out a year or two later on, and for crimes of thinking. And
Crimes of Thinking. I love it. There's another book in that.
yeah, I think I remember being told that my ideas were dangerous to the other young people. I'd asked too many many pressing existential questions about the nature of God, and it was like, get out. And also, we were interested in aromatherapy and other ways in which to work holistically in personal development, and those were considered to be unsuitable for a number of reasons. And yes, we've been on almost like parallel paths our whole lives, and then those parallel lives have spiraled so many times, so that we keep coming back to the same points and meeting each other again and again and again. It's been really fascinating, and I'm working with her again now, and it's just the most enlightening journey all over again, this time without the cultural lens of a particular church outlook, so that's really helpful. And yeah, we've got a lot to offer. We're going to have a group program launching very soon for people who want to step into leadership roles, and for people who are already in businesses that involve leadership but would like to advance on those as well. So we're super excited about that. She's such an inspirational, luminous person in herself, that yeah, she had the fortitude to introduce us to each other, and here we are.
Absolutely, and lots more exciting collaboration stuff to come. And I'll just leave it as stuff for the moment, because there's a list. Anyway, thank you so much for taking the time. I really do appreciate it. This was very, very enlightening, and super excited to share it with everyone. So thank you very much, and we'll chat soon.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you for all your help. Speak to you soon.
Thank you.